The Town of Woodbridge Housing Committee. And just for the record, I am Kathy Hunter, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. And we have with us tonight, we have Nicole Donzello, Donathan Lofters, and Mary Dean. And guys, you're gonna put your cameras on, and we're gonna see you tonight.
In a little bit, I'm just moving around, trying to get settled.
Okay, okay. And we have a couple special guests with us. We have Ben Fink, who SCROG has hired to help us with the community conversations we're going to have on affordable housing. And we have Ben Lovejoy, who is the new director, was it regional director of planning for SCROG? Do I have your title right?
Uh,
Oop.
think my oh, there we go. Sorry, the audio was a little off. Yeah, it's Director of Regional Planning and Municipal Services.
Okay, great. Well, congratulations. And nice to meet you on your new position. Um, Okay, and of course, just like to acknowledge our esteemed support we have from Chris Sullivan at the town. And so, what I would like to do first, and this is going to be kind of a standing agenda item, is just to kind of go over the minutes from the previous meeting, just to make sure we're building on what we are currently doing. So, in terms of what we talked about at last meeting, we had Aaron Hoffman, who was from Neighbor Works New Horizon. That's a nonprofit affordable housing developer, and they're also a Chodo that does affordable housing in in uh, in Connecticut and around the New Haven area. And he just kind of talked about, gave us a little a preview of different developments that they're doing. And I thought we had a really good discussion on just kind of brainstorming on maybe some working on some regulatory and administrative barriers to creating affordable housing. And and came up with some discuss some potential ideas we could have for promoting affordable housing, like having the town provide land for donate land or sell land for $1 or tax abatements or just cutting down the fees on the permitting fees in order to make affordable housing a little bit more financially feasible. So and just to piggyback on that, and I'm probably going off tangent here, but we had a P and Z meeting on Monday, and the chair Rob Clee has suggested that we actually have do a presentation, the housing committee do a presentation to planning and zoning, and talk about the different recommendations we'd like to make to them. And I thought that was pretty good and encouraging. And we already had made a couple recommendations from last meeting on changing some zoning regulations. That included, incorporating uh, was not a zoning regulation, but incorporating the affordable housing plan into the plan of conservation and development, and then expanding opportunity housing into the Dev One zone to have multi housing in order to encourage some other housing opportunities. And what else did we talk about? And then we're going to be talking about this in a bit, but we talked about getting a list of town-owned properties that could perhaps be used or be bundled up for affordable housing. And Nicole had reported about how Coopop is updating that list. And she's going to talk about a little bit more about that process in a bit. And then we talked about Ben Fink. um, you know, and hopefully by the end of this session, we're going to have a meeting set for a power mapping session. And then we talked about the SCROG meeting. We had a SCROG meeting update. So, and that's going to be another regular agenda item. Is every month SCROG is having a meeting, the Regional Housing Task Force meeting, which everybody is always invited to partake. I know it's during the day, um, but we like to just bring, talk about the information that was presented at those meetings because they are very, very good and very informative. So with that, is there any discussion on the notes or what we talked about or anything anybody wants to add or anything I missed? No? We're good?
Well, Kathy, I had a quick question. Just to get back to the opportunity housing zones. As you indicated, we did indicate that we wanted to expand into Deb one, but currently, can you just recap what zone in town currently has the ability for that opportunity housing?
Um, Probably Chris, you're probably better off in rattling that off.
Chris, sorry.
So the way it's written is it's anywhere where there's public sewer and public water,
Right.
which allows it down pretty much anywhere down in the flats because you have sewer and water all through there. And
Hmm.
then there was a town map that was part of the, trying to think, it was part of the 2019 discussion on the application from One Orchard Road that showed where there's public sewer and public water in limited areas in the residential A zone. So,
Hmm.
for instance, on Fountain Street and in Sonia, so going up by the country club, the Woodbridge Country
Hmm.
Club, um, and then there's a little bit around the high school on North Pease where you have both sewer and the water comes up Center Road, but it doesn't go down North Pease. The high school gets the water from Newton. So the sanitary line comes in North Pease to the high school, and the water line comes in from Newton. So they're at different places, but the water line does go by the end of North Pease.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's probably just a good description. Anywhere where there's public water and, and sewer, that makes it easy for the opportunity housing.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so with that, I'd like to turn this over to Ben to talk about his process in engaging the community in the discussion with about affordable housing and just brainstorm how we could get this done. So,
Cool.
I
Thank you.
had difficulty getting my mic off mute. When we finish this, could you come back to me for my question? Thank you.
oh, I'm sorry, I
Oh,
didn't.
you
By
go.
all means, you
Not
first,
your
Mary.
fault. I couldn't get to see the
Mary,
word.
go ahead.
It was a simple one. You mentioned in an email that Aaron had been willing to join our group. Has that been moved forward?
I think it's in the process. I think he's mulling over a couple other things, so I'm not sure at this point.
So the
But
ball's in his court.
yeah, I'd like to have him maybe he just show up once in a while because he has great, of course, he's got great experience and knowledge, and he would be a major asset to this committee. But you know, we'll we'll soon find out. All right, Ben, go ahead.
Cool. Good evening, everybody. It's great to meet you, Chris and Nicole and Mary and Donovan. And Ben Lovejoy and I have talked a couple times last couple weeks since he came on. So he's mostly here to listen, but of course, jump in if you got anything. And Kathy and I have been talking about this now for probably about a year, and about the ways that we can expand the housing conversation in Woodbridge. And we were initially talking about ways it could happen just specifically with Woodbridge and how to fund it, etc. But then in a happy way, um, I'm now doing this through SCROG, so this is something you got me for free to the extent that you want to get me at all. And I mean that in a serious way, which is the last thing I want to be is another pain in your ass that you've got to deal with in addition to everything else that you're dealing with. So I want to work together to the extent that what I can offer is helping you get where you want to go. Now, I know Kathy sent a bunch of materials out, so I don't want to insult your intelligence by giving a whole long spiel about stuff that you already know. So I'm going to keep this initial bit short. And then if people have got questions, I'm happy to elaborate on any of it. So basically, the idea is I'm going to start talking region wide and then I'll zero in on Woodbridge. So just so you know about me, a lot of y'all know my father. He is the housing expert. I'm not a housing expert. What I'm an expert in is working with people. I am right now in rural Wisconsin, rural Wisconsin, where I'm facilitating storytelling sessions to share about hopes and fears about the rural economy, including with farmers that have lost their land and people that are trying to get their way out of poverty and expand and diversify an economy in one of the most purple counties in the United States. I worked for years in the Kentucky coal fields, helping left wing environmentalists and right wing strip mine bosses see eye to eye and build a big alternative energy project together. Like this is the stuff that I do is make it possible for people to come together across their differences in a space that everybody knows they're going to be able to speak and be heard, and they're going to listen, and afford others the same opportunity. And so some years ago, I grew up in Connecticut, so and come to visit family from time to time. And some years ago, my father said, this work is really relevant to housing in Connecticut because it is an issue that can be very polarizing, that can be scary to talk about, that can make a lot of people shut down. And he said that this is, would I be interested in doing some of this work? I said, well, let's have these conversations. So I've been working for a couple of years with Team Inc., the community action agency based in Derby that includes Woodbridge as part of its footprint, its catchment area. And so have started in other towns, including Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Milford, and Seymour, groups of residents across different kinds of lines, age lines, ideological lines, religious lines, class lines, race lines, to start coming together and figure out how can we how can we make it possible for everybody to have a place to live in a way that is not somebody else from the outside coming in and say, you all have got a big problem and I'm going to solve it. But we are going to come together and solve it ourselves. And we're going to do it in collaboration with government. We're going to do it in collaboration with local businesses, other stakeholders. And we're going to do it in a way where we lean into the tension because it is a tense issue and it's difficult. And we're going to talk about the difficult stuff, but we're going to do it in a way where everybody is safe. And that is work that has been successful, like I said, in some other towns. And, to be honest with you, have made attempts over the years to get into Woodbridge in that way, and those attempts have not been successful. Because I think in Woodbridge, for a lot of reasons that I don't need to tell you, I think there is a particular level of fear around having frank, honest conversations about housing. And, it will be no surprise to you that I am very pro affordable housing, pro housing opportunity for all, et cetera. But at the same time, you know, I understand the idea that nobody wants to have a conversation where somebody else is going to stick a finger in their face and call them a racist, right? This is not the way you do things. When I was in the coal fields of Kentucky, I worked with diehard Trump voters, and I would introduce myself as a communist Jew from the Northeast because I'm not going to BS about the fact that we got differences. But then we can make a space where they know I'm going to listen to them. And so they're more comfortable listening to me. And we start breaking down these barriers, not by pretending our differences don't exist, but actually by acknowledging them in a way and then figuring out what are the things that we actually both care about? What are the things that matter to all of us? And how can we make a plan together to act on those things in a way that's actually in all of our interests, expresses all of our values, and furthers all of our ideas for the way we want our town to be and the kind of place we want to live in. And in doing that, in working in that way, we find that there's actually a ton that connects us, way more than we think. There's way more common ground than we think, and there's way lesser reason to fear each other than we think. And so I'm pretty convinced after doing some research and a handful of conversations with people, including Kathy, with people including Beth Heller and her staff, that there, if we can get a lot of people in a room in Woodbridge, there's going to be a lot of support for what this committee is doing. The challenge is, how do we find them and how do we get them into that room? And how do we then, in that room, facilitate a kind of conversation where people will actually open up and figure out how to co create together? And those are the things that I can offer. That is the technical expertise that I can offer, not about the substance of housing policy, which is really important. And you know a lot about that. And my father knows a lot about that. At SCROG, we're calling that like, what has it been? It's like part one or track one of the housing effort is the technical part of how do we make the affordable housing happen. What I'm here to talk about is part two, track two, which is how do we make it possible for as many people as possible from as many communities and perspectives and backgrounds within our towns to take part in that conversation, take part in the realizing of an affordable housing plan, because people are going to defend what they're a part of making, right? A thing that I say is, you um, think about food that you're happy to eat at home, that if you got at a restaurant, it's like, no, I'm sending this back, right? When you are a part of making it yourself, it is a much different ballgame. And so the way this work starts is we work together to figure out who in our town can be at the table and how do we get them there. And that's where we get into the details of the power mapping session and the stuff that Kathy was talking about. But before we get there, I want to pause there to first of all ask Kathy and Ben if there's anything you'd like to add to what I just said. And then for everybody else, if you have questions, comments, concerns, stuff that we want to about the overall framing.
I mean, I just would like to add that I think for the most part, folks in Woodbridge, I think they would embrace, the whole concept of affordable housing. I always felt that it was just kind of overridden by a very loud minority voice that just talks louder and is much more organized in getting their viewpoints. And I think it's just, people for the most part, I think, probably a majority of people are either neutral to the idea or maybe mildly supportive of the idea, but are just too busy to even think about it. I mean, I think about myself, like for instance, I lived in Bridgeport. I lived in Woodbridge since 2000, and I would say for the first 20 years, I had no idea what was going on in Woodbridge. I was not involved in politics because I worked in Bridgeport, and I was really consumed with what was going on in Bridgeport and that politics because it affected what I was doing. And I just kind of, drove in and out of Woodbridge every day, not even knowing what was happening in town hall. And it wasn't until, I left my job in 2020 that I started, and just so happens, Open Communities Alliance, did their zoning application. I started following that and just found it very, very interesting. Um, that's when I started getting, just involved with the town and caring about what was happening. But I think for the most part, people would be committed to this and interested in this. It's just, how to get people's how to captivate that interest for very busy people. um, it's hard. It takes a big commitment because they're already, young families are already consumed with just, working and having families and going to their children's activities. And adding another layer or something else to do is hard to do. So that's just my thoughts.
Well, I
And
will take a minute to first off just introduce myself and thank you all for allowing me to be in the conversation. So my name is Ben Lovejoy. I am a week and a half into my new role as Director of Regional Planning at the South Central Regional Council of Governments. I am born and raised in Connecticut, a product of this state and a product of affordable housing too. Growing up, I was one of four with a single mother and who was a gigging musician, so we didn't have a lot. And I still grew up in Farmington, which for most of you, you're probably aware, is a relatively affluent town. Um, but we were one of the few places that was considered affordable. So when it comes to these things, it is something I feel a great amount of attachment to because I know of the power of getting access to a lot of these areas in the subsequent amenities, whether it be education, lack of crime, just a safer, green spaces, all of the amenities that people value in the suburbs that are often excluded from individuals, predominantly based on availability of income. So, I'm new in this role, and I'm excited to do this work with all of you. I'm excited to work with Ben in overseeing what sort of what he's going to be doing. And I will let you know just one of my very first projects or tasks with the COG is to draft an action plan. Um, as you may or may not be aware, the COG is in the process of adopting a regional housing plan. We had one drafted, I believe they finalized the draft back in August. It's yet to be fully adopted. The leadership at the COG would like to see and have tasked me with creating a logical action plan for how we can align our regional plan of conservation and development, which has already been adopted, that has certain commitments to diversifying the region via housing stock, looking at our local plans of affordable housing that have been adopted already by the 15 member municipalities, and how I can start to lay out the groundwork for how we can actually move the needle forward. Our leadership team is well versed at the COG in local politics, and I am a local politics kind of guy, and I understand the nature of these relationships and the potential for them to be emotional and driven. These are important things to people. But what our leadership at the COG would like to see is moving beyond some of the sort of quintessential flowery planner language that my profession is particularly guilty of laying into the bulk majority of their plans, and move it into an actual space that we can actually see change happen. And so, what I envision, at least in working with the various affordable housing committees or housing committees throughout our municipalities, is I view you all as my boots on the ground. You understand your dynamics of your town better than I ever will, and you know the ins and outs of a lot of these things. So I'm hoping to be able to begin to earn your trust, so that you see me as an advocate for some of the work that you'd all like to do. And furthermore, I'm hoping to get your thoughts and ideas um, on things like your wish list of what you'd like to see. I mean, right off the bat, from your minutes overview. I love this idea of incorporating the affordable housing plan into the plan of conservation and development. That gets commitments to the town that says, okay, we're taking this and we're making it part of this larger document that has some statutory requirements when it comes to planning. It allows for me to make recommendations when things come before our regional planning council. So love that idea. The power mapping I think is going to be great. The work that Ben's going to be doing, and I loved hearing list of properties that could be used. And I think that that's going to be a big part of what I'd like to see in the action plan is for um, there to be some aspect of identifying priority areas or priority development areas. Because many of the affordable housing plans talked about Main Street development, talked about centralizing development around resources, and knowing that you guys are sewer short, identifying those areas is going to play a huge role. And so sorry to go longer than intended to, but that's kind of who I am and where I'm at and what I'd like to see. I ask patience as I learn my new role, but I'm really excited to begin this work because it takes commitment. And so thank you all for taking your time out to be here and like I said for giving me the opportunity to speak.
So to come to a specific, and this is going off what Kathy said about how there is, to use a term from another context, if there's a silent majority that says, yeah, of course there needs to be a place for people to live here who are teachers, who are, work in the shops, who are cops, who are firefighters. Like, of course we need some affordable housing. Um, how do we make it possible for that silent majority to speak? And the answer to that question, that I have found to be true working in lots of communities and lots of places, is you find the people where they're already organized. In the Kentucky coal fields, that's community centers and volunteer fire departments. In other parts of in the parts of the valley, it's churches. It's even sort of local grassroots led service organizations. These organizations look different in every community. Sometimes they're official, sometimes they're not. There's neighborhood associations, there's cultural organizations, but one way or the other, sometimes sometimes they're Facebook groups, but one way or the other, there are ways in which people in every community are organized. And the key to helping that silent majority to speak is you got to meet the people where they're at, right? You got to go in. If you call a housing community meeting at City Hall or Town Hall, a certain number of people are going to show up. If you're going to do it at their own church, a whole lot more people are going to show up, invited by their pastor or their lay leadership or the people that they have already built trust with. And so the goal for us is to identify those organizations, those community organizations, and the people in those organizations that a lot of other people have built trust with, and build relationships with them and invite them to join us and work with us in reaching the people in their communities to figure out, how can we have conversations? Again, how can we have conversations about this where everybody's viewpoint is respected? The point isn't to convert anybody to the great gospel of affordable housing, because I understand, there are legitimate concerns on all sides. The point is to make it possible for that conversation to happen, first really locally within different communities and then across those communities. And when you make it possible for that conversation to happen, then people are going to recognize how much overlap there is, how much commonality there is, and how we can take some of these actions that are being proposed with a whole lot more support than there is at present. So the next step, and this gets to the power mapping that you keep talking about. The next step, as I see it, and that has already started happening in some of the other SCROG towns, would be for us to find time to get together, ideally sometime in the next month to month and a half, and probably sometime in January, for us to get together for a couple hours in person with the people here and anybody else that we might want to invite, not thinking about, huge turnout numbers, but people we've got connections with in the community that are dedicated to this and have got connections to a lot of other people themselves. And we come together. First of all, we get to know each other a little bit. And then we start literally, taking pieces of butcher paper and mapping out where is the community organized? How does it look? Who are the people there? Who can they deliver? And then who of us can contact each of those people? And we talk about a little bit of what that contacting looks like, what the goals are, how to have the conversation. And then we leave that meeting with assignments saying, I'm going to contact this person, you'll contact that person, you'll contact the other person. And then about a month later, we would come up with, we would find time to meet again and say, who've we got and where are we going to start? And where are these conversations going to start? So that is what I would propose as a next step from here, recognizing that I know there's other stuff on the agenda tonight, is if this feels right to everybody, let's put a time on the calendar in the next, probably next month, where we can get together in person and start mapping out our community and saying, how are we going to reach people to bring them into these conversations?
In terms of the power mapping exercise, what is the ideal amount of people that should be at that first
It's a good
meeting?
question. I would say 10 to 20 would be ideal. More than 20 gets unwieldy. Less than 10, maybe you don't have enough perspectives to think about the whole community.
Okay, because we had thought about inviting other, we have different committees
Mhm.
that are doing different initiatives, and inviting representatives of the different committees and commissions, and having that be like the core group to help with our brainstorming, and that also could help us coordinate our efforts better, because we realize we're a bunch of commissions that kind of work in silo, and there needs to be better coordination. And this way it could probably bring us together as a town in the work that we're doing. So that
I
was
love that idea.
thoughts.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I think this has got to be an all hands on deck effort, and if this process can help to allow for that coordination, so much the better. I would say the only thing I would say as an addition to that is let's get a few people in here that are not part of government, that are connected to the community in different ways, in addition to those people, so that we have that perspective as well.
Kathy, there's a Facebook page that I think could be a great resource, and I could talk to you about that as well, of individuals who'd be very supportive of the affordable housing initiative. So I can certainly show that to you, and I think that would be a great start. If we're doing non government at the
Hmm.
moment, these are people in our community. I'd be more than happy to show that to you.
Nicole, could you tell us what the name of the Facebook page is?
Give me one second.
Yeah, yeah. Because what I'd be thinking about for this is, since we want to have a pretty intimate conversation, not like post a thing saying, "Hey, anybody come." But if you know some people in that group, or a few of those people that have posted really important things, just to direct message them and let them know about it and invite them.
Right. So I'm looking it up. Bear with me for a second. But
No
these
worries.
these are the individuals who are the grassroots organizers that we're talking about.
Cool.
These are the individuals who um, were very involved with the DEI issue that was happening at school, right, and ensuring that that went through. Things of that nature. So I could certainly go through and tell you exactly who the individuals are who do
No need.
reside in Woodbridge. So, and invite them if you want.
Yeah, I think the caveats would be, make sure, again, invite the ones that you think would be best, just because to keep the numbers small, and also make sure that at this point, we want to make sure that there aren't people there who are gonna. We want. Let me say this in a different way. We want people that are on board with the idea of hearing all perspectives, right? And
Oh,
so
they
what we
are. They
don't
are.
want. Okay, cool. Because
Mhm.
I hear DEI where it's like you're a racist, you're a racist,
Yeah,
you're a
yeah,
racist.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. But I
Okay,
understand
cool.
what you're saying. There are some that I would probably not extend an invitation to because of that
Right.
purpose,
At
and there
this
are others
point,
who
right?
are more open.
Exactly. and
Yeah.
and we want to build a process, like we think about this as like, the layers of the onion, right? Like
Mhm.
eventually we absolutely do want the people who are you're a racist, you're a racist, you're a racist, and we want the people that are not in my damn backyard, right?
Right.
We want to have room for all those people at this
Mhm.
moment, right? We want people that that
Mhm.
that that kind of see the core the way we do. So are neither strident NIMBYs nor strident sort of let's say ideologues. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense. I know exactly
Cool.
what you're talking about. So,
Cool, cool.
let me look for it, Kathy.
Yeah.
And then we'll
I
chat
I
about
love
it.
that though, Nicole. I think
Yeah.
that would be wonderful. And again,
Mhm.
thinking about the other criterion, beyond, that kind of perspective is who are the people that have got good connections, right? Who are the people that are connected to their neighbors? We want, we don't want like we all know the lone wolf who shows up at every meeting with lots of opinions and accountable to nobody, right? Those are not the people we want at this point. We want the people that get what it means to represent a community and to be accountable to their neighbors. Cool. I
Okay.
love that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions or thoughts?
Oh, I did want to just quickly say, I will put in the chat the link to the registration for those of you who may um, on this group want to attend the either virtually or in person for the upcoming the regional housing working group presentation with Ben's father. So I will stick that in there and along with my email. I forgot to mention that when I was speaking before.
Cool. Thank you. So, do we want to go ahead and set a date?
Yeah, I did have like one more question in
Please.
terms of rolling this out because we're gonna have a in-person mapping session, right? Where we're gonna try to get
Mhm.
some people together and we're gonna identify some groups, and then there's gonna be some smaller conversations that are going to happen, and then at some point there's gonna maybe be a more bigger community
Mhm.
conversation where we bring in these different groups together. How many times are you planning on coming to Connecticut? And are you going to be doing all these community groups, or I'm just trying to figure out,
Totally.
your time and how this is going to roll out because it sounds really good. It sounds very ambitious. Um, so I mean, I just want to get a sense of what you're planning and when you're planning on being in Connecticut over the next, I don't know, 6 months or so.
Totally. So, for people who don't know, I live in Philadelphia. I live in South Philadelphia, but I do come to Connecticut often. I usually come to Connecticut twice a month,
Okay.
and I'm going to continue. Like next, I'll give you my dates in January in a second because I know them. Um, but yeah, so I will basically the way I work is I do everything I can virtually by phone, text, email, Zoom call, WebEx, whatever. And then something like the power mapping session where you really it can't be done effectively virtually, show up for that and yeah, and then sort of pack my time in Connecticut full of meetings. So yeah, I'm in Connecticut usually twice a month. My current SCROG contract lasts until June. There was talk about extending it. I was very clear, like, yeah, this is a big project. This is ambitious. When you're trying to build this kind of community capacity, it doesn't happen quickly. But things can start happening quickly. So will we have a critical mass to change housing policy by June? Probably not. Will we have identified leaders and started conversations and we're starting to see some possibilities opening up? Yes, I think so. And in terms of my personal leadership, part of the goal of this is there's going to be training along the way. So that I'm going to be starting doing more. And then as it gets going and we identify leaders in this work who may include some of you and some of the other people that we have in our next meeting or the meeting after that, the goal is for us to start doing trainings together, both in Woodbridge and with other towns, which is also an opportunity to meet people, other towns doing this, to learn how to do this stuff so the process isn't dependent on me. So I move from a leader to a trainer to a coach. So that now, for instance, the work that started with team a couple of years ago, I barely run any meetings in that. I show up at them sometimes. I call in, I zoom in, I show up when I'm in town, and then I'm on the phone a lot with leaders beforehand and afterwards to plan them and debrief and think about strategy and that stuff. So the goal is that this becomes a self-sufficient process, and I am a catalyst in getting it started and help it and help it start most effectively.
Okay. So in terms of your January dates,
Yeah. So I'm going to be in town in January on the 9th and 10th of Monday the 9th and Tuesday the 10th, and that following whole week, the week of the 16th. And if we're talking about doing this in the evening, am I right in saying we want to do this in the evening?
I think it depends. I was kind of hoping it would be like yeah, because we have a lot of meetings,
Mhm.
like during the week. So usually, like the last week of the month is when there isn't any. Usually, there isn't regularly scheduled meetings. So, but you're not planning on being there towards the.
Yeah, I'm not able to be in town the week of the 23rd.
Um. Okay.
So
Uh,
we could check with the town and see what availability there is for a meeting that evening, right? I know there's a lot of standing meetings. There are meetings at the last week of the month as well,
oh,
too.
is it?
So
Okay.
yeah, so we just probably should check the calendar and see what would work out.
Would it help for me to
Maybe,
check to pull up the calendar right now?
oh, sure.
Let's
Maybe
see.
we relocate to the library room and do it
Yeah.
earlier, right? Maybe we do
Yeah, is
something
the
like
problem
that.
You
problem
just
the
have to
time
remember the library kicks you out at 8.
Mhm.
conflict?
Right, which is like we'd have to start at 6, I would say, right? Which would
Yeah, start at
could
6 or
potentially
even
be.
And
5:30.
the week of the 16th, the town is closed on Monday because that's Martin Luther King
Martin
Day.
Luther King Day, right?
Mhm.
So Monday, I'm just looking at the calendar. Monday the 9th, there's a zoning board of appeals meeting at 7:30. Otherwise the library commission and the police commission. So I could do that evening. Tuesday the 10th would be a little bit more difficult for me, but I could figure it out if need be. Um, Tuesday, then the following week, Tuesday the 17th, um, there is just a 2030 task force at 5 p.m. at town hall. And
The 18th is wetlands.
yeah. So I mean, my feeling is we don't. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a night when nothing else is going on. But can we do it? Can I mean how? Which of these meetings is it essential that we not conflict with?
Well,
Well,
I think that I think I'm sorry, Kathy. I think that the 2030 task force, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe that one of the goals, and Chris, you may know more about this than myself, but is to grow the grand list. So I would think that those would be individuals that we would want to include eventually when we decide to include other committees. Um, so I don't know if we're not. It was your position, Ben, that we don't invite individuals yet that are involved with other committees, or you do
Mm-mm.
agree with that?
No, I
If
I
so,
think that it's
I would
I
say
think that
that
it's
they should be
totally
there.
I think it's totally fine to do it at this point. I
Mhm,
think it is not essential at this point that everybody we want involved in the project
mhm,
be invited. That we invite the people we think are most central, are most connected, are most important, and
mhm,
are most energized. Recognizing that if this works, it's going to be growing.
mhm. So, I mean, if we're talking, not everybody, like Ben said, but if we were to identify specific individuals that are on committees that kind of have the same the same vision, I would say. I would think that the 2030 task force wanting to grow the grant list would be one of the committees that we certainly would want to include. But and if that's the case, then I'm only bringing that up because they meet that week. I think you said right, Ben? On
Right. That's on the 17th. So
right.
it
What
looks
about the
like
19th? Is that a possibility? A
the
Thursday?
19th, I got another meeting already scheduled that night.
Hmm. Okay.
So the nights that work best for me are the 9th, the 17th, and the 18th. The 9th, it's the library commission, the police commission, and the ZBA.
I would guess the library's meeting in the library if the zoning board of appeals, Chris, that's in town hall, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would mean that the library wouldn't even be available for another meeting spot. And then the 18th is wetlands. Chris, are you with the wetlands?
Yep. That's my favorite one.
Are you on every committee, Chris? Come on.
No, only 3 land use and you guys.
Okay.
But then I have my
Only
own
4?
towns that I deal with, so.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
And then this, I'm sorry, you said the 17th, right, Ben, as well? So but that's
That's the 2030. Now the 2030 committee, though, that's at 5 at town hall. We could do it after that. We could do it at like 7.
we could.
How long do their meetings usually go for?
I have no idea.
I don't know. But we could have the conversation with them, right? And indicate what we're doing and
I
Yeah,
can't imagine it would go longer than 2 hours.
yeah. I mean, I did talk to the co-chair um, at some point and did suggest that we wanted to coordinate, cross pollinate some of our efforts. So,
Mhm.
um, so maybe the 17th, like at 7, maybe they could just some of them could just hang around for another meeting.
Get some pizza or something.
Yeah.
Chris will bring some cookies in.
Love it.
I'll be up in Bethany at a wetland meeting of my own, so you won't have me that night.
Oh,
Oh, Chris. Would that replace our January 4th meeting as a working meeting on the 17th?
um, I'd rather that it didn't because we have lots of work.
Is that
Yeah.
the issues.
I mean, I think this is important, but we're also kind of moving on some of the strategies that I think we need to move on if we want to take. I mean, if we should be able to take advantage of some funding opportunities out there. Um, there's another project I meant to mention earlier uh, that I like to just introduce to the group, and it goes around the idea of expanding public water and sewer. Um, but we could talk about that later. Anyway, so why don't we?
If the problem is venue, do you think we could go to the JCC again?
Yeah, I think we
I
could, but
think
I
there are
don't think we
places
need
that
that
we
big.
could hold 20 people. That's 20 people in the middle of the winter in COVID. It's a big room.
Yeah, we probably could. I don't know if we need that big
It doesn't need to be 20 people. It could be, I would say that's the upper limit,
Hmm.
just to be clear.
But
Like
still,
we did this
yeah.
in Guilford last week with 12 people and it was very effective. I'd even say 10. Honestly, you know what? Just thinking about it again, 10 to 15 would be ideal, more than 10 to 20. I'm rethinking that.
Have that many places that are that big. There's a parish hall
Mhm.
across the street.
The library doesn't have any government stuff happening that night.
Um, I will also just throw it out, if ever needed, feel free to let me know about the conference room at SCROG. I'd be more than happy to. I'm only about 30 minutes from the office, so I'm more than happy. I don't know how close it is really though for all of you, but
Yeah, I don't think people would hike out to North Haven.
A
yeah.
lot of, that's a lot
But
of hikes.
if ever needed,
Yeah, thanks.
feel just
Um,
so it's open. I'll take care of it for you.
So Kathy, I would just check with the town and see if it's even a possibility to piggyback and if that date's even available. I know on the night that my commission meets, we piggyback with another committee in town. So just have to make sure. You saw the calendar. It doesn't seem like there is anything after that, but just to
Mhm.
make sure it
Also,
works with the town.
yeah, the library is open until 8, so that would be
Not work.
that,
It would not
that
work.
wouldn't work. That wouldn't work so well. Um,
Is
I
the
do
library?
wonder if there is a church parish hall or the JCC. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's good.
yeah, I mean there is a church parish, and they have a pretty big area to meet. It's right next door to the town hall.
I think the meeting room in the town hall is bigger than the library meeting room if the concern is space. That library room off to the right. Unless there's another one I haven't been in, which is a possibility. But
So can we set the 17th at 7 p.m. location TBD?
We could do that. It's also center school. Chris, is that something people meet at night, or is that only or open
If you're
early?
talking about the center building, I don't know that there's any meeting rooms that are available, but I can check.
All right, we'll figure it out. So why don't
Because
we?
they're doing renovations down in the basement, so stuff has been kicked upstairs.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. They are renovating. Um. All right. Well, we'll figure it out.
Sounds good.
We don't need to have a meeting
Yeah,
on.
we got it. We got more than a month. I think the important thing, and I appreciate Nicole, you already starting to think about this, is starting to think about people. Like Kathy, I'm immediately thinking about Katie Poole at Massaro Farm, who I know is really into this and got various connections. And a couple other people I could think about. But yeah, I think just giving people that save the date um, and time, location can be figured out a lot as it gets closer. But we want to make sure that people, they keep that date and time open.
Okay. Um. All right. So we should probably think about like who from the different committees and who we would like to invite because we don't. I think we're talking about like a representative of each committee.
No worries if it doesn't work out this time to invite everybody, like, because this is we're not this I want to make this clear too, because this is a place where we can get caught up. We're not planning like another official commission, or this is an ad hoc informal working group, where we're figuring out how to have conversations with people, right? This is not a decision making body in terms of town policy. Like, there already is a housing committee, and do not in any way want to step on that. This is about working together to augment that work and bring more people into the conversation. So people can't make this first power mapping session does not mean they can't meet they can't join the next planning meeting. And ideally, if we're doing this work right, we're constantly going to be adding more people. There's going to be new people coming in all the time.
That's right. The whole idea. So you already had a power mapping session with the town already?
Sure did.
Did you have like a little invite that you sent out to people, give them a little brief overview as to what you were doing?
I believe the town planner did. Yeah, I think she wrote something up and shared it with people. I didn't do the invitations myself, which I think is good. I think it's important that they come from you all.
Okay.
And if
Oh,
you want, I don't know, Kathy, you probably know Jamie Stein from Guilford. She's great, and I'm sure if you wrote to her and asked her for the language she used, she'd be happy to share it with you.
okay, we'll do that.
Cool.
Okay, do we have any other questions for Ben or no? All right, well, thanks, Ben. And you're happy. I mean, you're welcome to hang around and listen to the rest of our meeting if you're interested in
I
hearing.
think I will. I'm gonna have a little dinner, so I'm gonna go off video, but I look forward to learning from you, and I look forward to meeting you next month.
Great, great. And Ben, other Ben as well, just you please feel free to just, hang around and listen to how we're trying to operationalize our affordable housing plan.
Love it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the other thing. I'm sorry, Ben.
Oh, I was just gonna say, don't mind me. I'll have my video off because like Ben, I will be eating my late dinner, so I will have the audio on. If I'm not giving input, it's because I got a
Thank
mouthful.
you. Okay.
Cool. And yeah, and just to say, if I don't think I was clear about this before, a big part of this engagement is about building support for the affordable housing plan, right? How people understand what's in it, and how people understand how it affects them. So, with any luck, this is all going to go together.
Right.
And if I can be helpful in facilitating other kinds of meetings about housing, like community meetings, don't hesitate to ask me there too. This is what I'm contracted to do, and certainly by all means, use me however you can. So
Right. Thanks, Ben.
thank you.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda, we were talking about a process for like proposing town-owned properties for a potential opportunity housing developments, affordable housing development, and I know Nicole has had some discussion on the town about a process. So, Nicole, if you want to talk about what you've come up with.
Sure. So on Friday, for Ben Square's information, I am the chair of the Commission on the Use of Publicly Owned Property for the town of Woodbridge. And it has come up recently, not only in this committee, but within COOPOP itself, what the proper procedure is if a committee or commission within the town would like to change the use of a town-owned property and or acquire property that would thus become publicly owned property and owned by the town of Woodbridge. So I met with the town attorney, Jerry Weiner, as well as Beth Heller on Friday to go over that procedure. And essentially, first and foremost, as I'm sure you're all aware, committees and commissions on their own should not be contacting developers or private landowners in order to obtain property or negotiate property that will essentially be owned by the town of Woodbridge. Second, if a committee or commission wishes, for example, for affordable housing, to identify specific publicly owned properties within the town that, for example, this committee may feel is an appropriate location for affordable housing, the process would be that it is the recommendation can either be sent to COOPOP directly so that, and then someone would come and present, and then all of the pertinent documentation associated with it would be provided to COOPOP. And essentially, COOPOP is to write a report to submit to the Board of Selectmen. It would look something to the effect of describing in detail the specific committee or commission's position, their wants, their supporting documentation. COOPOP is to then I don't. Again, I keep using the word investigate, but it isn't an investigation. But it is to basically research that particular claim, provide any other additional documentation regarding that want or need of a specific commission or committee, and then subsequently make their own recommendation, either agreeing with the recommendation, not agreeing with the recommendation, or maybe partial agreeing or not agreeing. So, and that would be submitted to the Board of Selectmen. So it's essentially, preparing a report and doing all the investigation possible and research so to make their job a little easier. At that point in time, the Board of Selectmen would then take over and, have whatever appropriate hearings or public input necessary. Um, I did misspeak, Kathy. I didn't mean to use the word referendum. It's actually a special meeting that would occur. If, for example, there's a piece of property that a commission or committee identifies as something that could potentially be sold or gifted to someone, in order to, again, I'm using this example, if there is a piece of property that was identified by this committee, for example, um, then, and if it's over the value of $50,000, a special meeting must occur. So I did misspeak on that, Kathy. I was, for some reason, had referendum on the mind. Yes, it's outdated. Yes, 50,000 is anything at this point. I mean, we have to look at when this charter was written, right? And I know that there is a want and a need within the town to, um, update the charter. But as it stands now, this is the procedure that has to be followed. And if a committee or commission goes directly to the Board of Selectmen with their recommendation regarding publicly owned property, then the first selectman will send it back down to COOPOP to, follow that procedure that I just detailed. So,
So the special meetings, that special meeting of the Board of Selectmen?
they're calling it, hold on, let me see. No, it would have to be for town input. So one second. Give me one second, please. I'll give you the exact language. I mean, that would be on the Board of Selectmen side, so they would be the ones calling a meeting to, let the town know that this is what was on the agenda, right? To determine whether or not, let's say, parcel A should be sold or gifted to developer B, and then that would be a special meeting. And then whoever shows up, and then it kind of goes over whoever shows up. 50%. Um, Over 50% wins, kind of thing. So like if two people show up and they're able to get 50%, just like everything else that we do in town, it kind of follows the same procedure.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the community conversations get really important to make sure that we have a majority in the room when it comes to a public meeting, and that's why this is like so important.
Right.
Um,
And I should mention too, I know we discussed reviewing the publicly owned property list, which I know we're going to be doing, right, to determine if there are any properties that would fit the needs of this particular committee. I can tell you, after all of the data is completed, being entered into a list, as I indicated at the last meeting, we're not just creating a list, but we're also creating the links to the property deeds themselves, which will indicate, restrictions. We'll have the restrictions on this particular document as well, if any. And it will also link to the, oh gosh, what is it called? There's another link as well, documentation that will be attached to those specific properties. And after that's completed, and everything is updated, because there is a claim by another commission in town that some of these properties are not properly listed. Um, Once that is completed, we are going to review that list as well and determine whether or not there are any properties on there that no longer serve a purpose as is for the town of Woodbridge. And that may be an opportunity to discuss what our needs are as a town, one of them being affordable housing, if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, I just like to maybe start a process sooner than later than waiting for this list to be done because I mean we know we could look at just the property records and just put in the town of Woodbridge and find out the land that the town owns, and then you could just do a a title search and and look for the restrictions. I mean, it's just a more complicated. Certainly, when you have your list together, it's going to be so much easier. But it sounds like it could take a while.
Well,
For
no, I
this.
mean, our deadline for the list will be that will be completed by our January meeting, so that when we go into our
Oh,
January meeting, we're going to determine, ensure that all of the properties are properly categorized with the restrictions. So this is
oh,
coming.
okay. All right, all right. Then maybe.
And regarding the special meeting and the quorum and things of that nature. I would certainly defer to Jerry Weiner on that particular piece. That's something that we would not do as a commission with COOPOP. So that would be something that the Board of Selectmen would have to call. So I'm sure that would be something that he could give more detail on. But again, it is the $50,000 limit, right? Once it's over $50,000, that's why a special meeting would have to be called.
Yeah, no,
So,
I expect there's gonna be, especially we're maybe talking about hopefully potentially bundling some properties. And then
So, Kath, I just want to interject real quick. Sorry. I started going through the properties myself, just looking at them, because when you go to the tax maps, you can just put in Town of Woodbridge and then it pops up all of the properties. And while the town owns lots of different properties throughout town,
mhm,
there are not many at all that would lend itself to what you would like to do.
hmm,
So, I mean, a lot of them were given to the town because they weren't buildable because they're very steep slopes or because they have wetlands on them. There's a number of them that were called the movie lots that are over off of Pease Road.
okay,
Where a long time ago, they at one of the movie theaters in New Haven, they actually gave away a parcel of land in Bethany or in Woodbridge, and a few people actually assembled enough of these small pieces to make a house. So you might, if you looked at it, had enough that the town could assemble to create a lot that something could be built on, but there's no public sewer or public water there. And so, just looking at this list real quick, the ones that you've touched on, like the country club and whatnot, are probably the low hanging fruit because there really isn't much out there from what I can tell.
what about that property on the town-owned property on Rimmon Road that we just threw out there as an
I
example?
haven't had a chance to look to see if that had any, what restrictions, if anything, around that.
Right, because you had mentioned that you thought that was going to be used for a school. Uh,
Originally, it was purchased for having a school
right.
when
Is
they
there
thought that the population was going to need another place to have a school.
so there must have been, I guess, in that thought process, there's probably some easier access to a public sewer line, I would
No,
imagine.
there's no sewer line up there.
No, but they would, in order to have a school, they would have had to
No, schools don't always have sewers. The
okay.
community school up in Bethany has no sewer. The junior high in Bethany has no sewer.
Oh, really?
Mhm. That's
Okay,
interesting.
interesting.
So it doesn't, no, that's not an assumption you should make.
Wow, okay. Well,
Oh, it's right.
well, I guess that'll be an interesting conversation when for SCROG when they talk about the nitty-gritty details of wastewater management in new developments. Anyway. Well, I mean, that goes to show you that their multi-family housing is probably pretty doable, um, and doesn't necessarily have to be on a public sewer if you have a whole school.
A
Uh,
school doesn't necessarily have the same use that families would have because you're not looking at doing showering and all that other kind of stuff. But you'll
Yeah.
get information from SCROG or you can get it from Quinnipiac Valley Health District.
yeah. Okay. Well, that
Anyway,
is
I just wanted to let you know there are a lot of properties out there that the town owns, but when you start looking at them and start looking at their right of ways, they're just not buildable because they were given to the town because there were wetlands or steep slopes. The
mhm.
list shrinks pretty quick.
Okay. But do you think there might be some? I mean, I know you have probably haven't did an exhausted list. Do you think there could be a possibility?
There are a few, but
Okay.
not
Not as
a
many as
lot.
they. All right, so maybe it's not the a prioritized strategy we should be talking about. Um, okay.
I just, after your last meeting, I said, let me go through and see what's out there.
Yeah, because I did see like 100 properties on there. I said, "Oh, look at all the properties that the town owns." Um,
Because I mean, one of the ones we talked about on Mylan has wetlands on it, so that's why it didn't get built. There's a
Okay.
couple on the corner of Johnson and Brookside, and those were given to the town because they're all wetlands. They were part of subdivisions back in the day when you could have a subdivision and you didn't care about wetlands, but nowadays you can't fill wetlands, so they're not buildable.
Right, and that's on the list as we're creating it now. All of these, the specific information that indicated by Chris with wetlands and other restrictions
Yeah.
will be on there, so you can just kind of, skim through and say, nope, wetlands, things like that.
Because I mean, like the town owns quite a few pieces on what's hypothetically Selden. Um, but if you look behind, Serve Pro and the trailer place, you're looking at a pretty steep slope, and that's where those lots are. So, we'll look at it and see if there's I mean, anything that's doable, like I had mentioned, the one that's on Manila, it's got sewer, it's got water. So you put a duplex or something up there. At least it's something.
Right, right. Um, what about because I didn't do a search on this. What about state-owned property in Woodbridge?
There's state-owned property. The majority of it is part of the West Rock Ridge State Park.
Okay.
So
It's a
I
park.
think that gives you a hint right there what it's used for.
Okay. All right. Well, we could strategize more on property. Um, all right. Any
Yeah.
other questions on that, Mary?
What what about the Regional Water Authority? They were divesting property at one point.
They sold off all of their Class 3 land. So
Okay.
everything that's left is Class 2 or Class 1. And they've discovered that, as have other water companies, that having undeveloped land is a better purifier of water than trying to do treatment, because right now they're investing in multi-million dollar upgrade to their treatment facility down on Litchfield Turnpike because they were getting algae blooms
Yeah.
because of climate warming and whatnot. And so they're not looking, to the best of my knowledge, to divest of any more land that they have.
That's too bad we didn't jump on. Well, then we don't want to
So
kill
when they had the sell off, that's when the town acquired the piece that's down closer to Orange, between Johnson and Racebrook, but south of the Merritt Parkway.
And what's that being used for?
It's open land, but we'd have to look and see if was it purchased because the town bought it. Was it acquired with a conservation restriction?
Okay.
it was.
It was. You already know
No,
that.
I'm just going to put my money on that it was.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any more conversation on trying to get some property to build housing on?
I think all of these restrictions that we will be researching before we just, cut and paste them onto the list. Um, and I'm sure they're correct, right? And they'll be at our fingertips and available for us to look and see what restrictions there are, so we don't have to guess.
Do all these restrictions, are they always in perpetuity or is there a way of undoing restrictions?
It's my understanding that if
So
they were,
I'm going to go.
oh,
Go ahead.
That's
sorry, go
okay.
ahead, Nicole.
Go ahead, Chris. It's okay.
All right. If the purchase was with funds that came with that restriction, I don't think it gets lifted.
Well, sometimes there might be circumstances under which it could be modified. It depends on the purchase agreement, as you say.
Well, it's the source of funding for it. If the funding,
Grant and aid. Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean. Did I not say that? Sorry. That's what I meant to say.
Yes, so there are some grant and aid properties that we do have in the town of Woodbridge. And there are properties utilized for open space that are not in perpetuity. So again, it does depend, like Chris indicated, right? If it's a grant and aid or what type of how it was purchased and restrictions at the time. But again, if it's, let's say, for argument's sake, I'm not even saying that this is the case, but let's say there are open spaces currently in the town of Woodbridge. Um, well, I'm just going to save that thought for a second. Let me just make sure the list is completed, and then we can
Go from
look
there.
and see what restrictions, if any. Perpetuity is a problem because that's in perpetuity, that's forever, and that will tie the hands of the town. But not quite sure off the top of my hand which properties in the town of Woodbridge are in perpetuity. I know there's a lot of open space properties, but whether they're in perpetuity or not is a different story. But again, like Chris said, it depends on what was used to purchase them.
Okay. I mean, I think it's just a strategy we should, keep on revisiting. I mean, I think there's got to be some opportunity to maybe there's a piece of land that we could just repurpose. Um, so that's my only thoughts.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. The next item is, this is another standing agenda item. It's just kind of reviewing the SCROG's Regional Housing Working Group meetings from November, because they are pretty informative. I know Mary, you were there, right? Do you have any
Oh, uh-huh.
comments on that meeting?
No, I was looking at my notes from last month, and I found them very curiously. It was like I was asleep or something. So they were kind of vague. And I thought, were you not following this? Or what? So I'm not going to be any help for November. So I'll try to do better this month.
All right. Well, I should have that. SCROG does record these meetings. November's meeting was about suburban myths. That when they talk about affordable housing being ugly, bringing crime, lowers property values, raises school costs, and all those things that we talked about. And I provided from the SCROG's meeting, some material that debunks those myths. But I think we've gone over this a number of times, that there's enough studies to debunk any myth that is out there. So I think it's just, when we're having these community conversations, we probably should just have those, you know, debunking abilities right at the tip of our tongues, so we could, talk to people and just let people know that no, it's not going to overcrowd the school or lower property values and things of that sort. In fact, it usually does the opposite. So that's the only thoughts I wanted to bring out. And in the next meeting, and I think Ben was going to put something in the chat. Anyway, the next meeting is on December 14th, 1 to 2:30. And again, everybody's invited, and I think we do send out notices on
Yeah,
this.
I can. Ben sent out a notice today that I can definitely
Yeah.
I put
forward.
for those I can see in the chat. I put the first link is the Zoom registration for next week's meeting. The second link for Survey Monkey is actually like it's a full schedule of all. I think there's 12 meetings. Um, that you can select which ones you say you're going to attend, and then I put the link to a public recording, like a public link that you can download last month's meeting audio for those who may want to listen to. Can you all see that in the chat or no?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I'm not sure if others.
Yeah, I don't see that in the chat either. I don't
It
know.
said all attendees, but maybe it's host and presenter. Let me see if I can select it all. And put it, let's
I mean,
try.
I did get the notice from you today about the meeting next week, so I could send that. I don't know, or did you send it out already, Chris?
I just sent it out again.
Okay, so Chris Chris sent out, she just sent out the reminder for next week's meeting. And that meeting is going to be on, I think it's on what, like transit oriented development.
Yeah, correct. So the upcoming meeting is on effective development of transit in and around transit hubs. The speakers are from Fairfield, I want to say Bethel and West Hartford. So it'll be a good mix too, because I'm assuming that West Hartford will be talking about their development in and around the fast track,
Mhm.
whereas the other two towns will be talking more transit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how much, I don't think we really will have much of transit oriented development in Woodbridge, but, um, it's just some good information. Certainly, I would like to encourage everybody for January's meeting, which is the nitty gritty details of wastewater management. And that probably gets me into, I meant to bring this up before, because the last SCROG update in October, they had somebody from talk about CDBG. And small cities, CDBG, which Woodbridge is a small city under the state, to apply for CDBG funds could be used for infrastructure. So, in terms of expanding the public sewer, I mean, that could be a thought of at least having the conversation of maybe expanding. And my initial thoughts were like, expanding the public sewer, going up Center Road, and that would create potentially, other sites for affordable housing, because right now we have a very limited land mass. I think it's like 1.2% of the land mass in Woodbridge has access to public water and public sewer. So that doesn't really help out, even though we have opportunity housing. It's just a real limit as to where we could have opportunity housing, because it has to have public water and public sewer. And by expanding that capacity, the infrastructure, we're able to create more potential sites. So that was, something I wanted to discuss, whether or not this is another area we should be thinking about, and perhaps encouraging the town to apply for funding to do something of the sort, because it is expensive, but public, the public subsidies do provide, pretty good funding to do these type of infrastructure projects, particularly if it could help overall development for a town. So that was a thought, and I don't know if we have any discussions on that, or
Yeah, just going back to the list of townhome properties. I think Nicole touched on this a little bit. If we could just get a solid list, and then a column with a list of properties, another column restrictions, and then we can identify one or two or three
mhm,
where we properties that we can use, or that we can suggest be used, and then we could start there in terms of if it's connected to sewer, or if it's not, or so forth. I know we had other housing strategies as well. But we should explore some of those. Some of those in terms of having residential above retail in the downtown area, that type of stuff.
yeah, yeah. Well, that was, like I said, I did propose that to the P and Z, and that's going to be part of. We'll probably have a public hearing on some, overall, because we're doing some zoning overhauls, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. We're probably just going to be putting some of the proposed updates with the overhaul of the zoning regulations up for um public comment.
No, you guys are gonna discuss what you want to go to hearing with, and then we'll schedule a hearing.
Okay, so that's not going to be in coordination.
That's it. There is no public comment outside of a public hearing on those. But then what the chair wanted to do was to kind of lump what the housing committee was thinking of wanting to do as one group of revisions to the regs, which would be separate from the overall cleanup of the regs, which hopefully will get done sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. That would be good. Um,
And while I'm on that real quick, one thing that I did mention to the members of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'll mention it to this group, is that I did have a call during the week from someone who was interested in building a smaller house, but our zoning regulations currently have a minimum square footage of a house, no matter where you are, of 1,200 square feet. And the individual who called was thinking of doing something smaller. So this is again a tactic that would, I mean, in a sense, the existing regulation doesn't support having a smaller house if you wanted to build a smaller house, and therefore that increases the cost of the house. So that this is another change that you might want to bring forward. I mean, I've mentioned it to the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, but you could also consider it and perhaps bring it forward to them, because this is something that is low-hanging fruit in a sense that does limit the ability of someone to build something smaller, because they'd have to currently seek a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals to build something smaller. So just throw that out there.
yeah. So what about,
Chris, oh, sorry. I just had a question follow up, Chris, for that procedure. So, would any recommendations that this committee makes regarding changes, to what we're discussing earlier, right? Um, be made to TPZ, or would it be made to the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen has nothing to do with zoning regulations. It's all
Okay.
planning and zoning.
Okay.
So the things that you discussed, expanding opportunity housing into Dev 1, expanding the general business or the GBA, that currently we have that in the regulations where you can have retail on the first floor and apartments on the second floor, but it's in a limited area. Expanding that so that that also goes into Dev 1, because then like 245 Amity, where you have retail on the first floor, but you have offices or what could be apartments on the second floor. That might be something that could be used there. And then likewise on the lender building, I always call it the lender building, the brick building that's over on Litchfield Turnpike. So that there would be, if we put everything together and had a hearing on those things under planning and zoning, then there would be an appropriate discussion for them and the community regarding steps taken to provide more opportunity in town for housing.
would that be like lumped together, or, you know, I'm just wondering if somebody would be okay with one provision but not the other, or would that be presented as a,
That's, everything would have to be presented as the specific changes to the zoning regs, and then people would be able to make comment on them. And then ultimately it's up to the Town Plan and Zoning Commission to vote on it.
yeah.
And, they can make whatever decision they want. And I always say, it's not a popularity contest in a sense. It's what the commission members feel are in conformance with the town plan and in the best interests of the town.
Mhm.
And certainly anyone can appeal any decision that's made by the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, but that's the function of having a public hearing. And having people come to the table and voice their opinions. Certainly at that hearing, the your committee could come and do a presentation on why those things are desirable to be done. Because planning and zoning doesn't normally step into the breach in terms of explaining um, why something's being done, although they can do it when it's a regulation that they're proposing themselves. But in this case, it could be a regulation that your housing committee proposes. And then that gives you the opportunity as the quote applicant to make the presentation and make the case and educate people about why this would be a good thing to do.
Okay. So we may want to think of other.
So you might want to think of, and it's, they can have hearings all the time. It's just that there's some things that are out there that could get done sooner rather than later that could make a difference. And even if it's just starting the ball rolling with letting things happen, it's something that can get the ball rolling. I mean, the Dev One thing and allowing opportunity housing in there, that should be a simple thing. Expanding the apartments over retail. Again, that's a pretty simple thing. We already have it.
All right, so we should probably think about in terms of doing that presentation. I probably would want to. We'll
I
kind
mean,
of
I can make a little list for you guys of, in a in a sense, and send it out so you have a better idea of what it is. I mean, I do this stuff all the time. You don't, so
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you could like put it in the language it needs to be in terms
yeah.
of.
And then I can send it out to everybody, and then you guys can discuss it.
I'm just wondering if there's any, if there are other zoning changes that could be made, that could also lend to this. And also there's, in terms of like a minute, I don't know if this is administrative because I don't think it's zoning. If what we were talking about in creating incentives for creating housing, um, some suggestions that Aaron had brought up is reducing the permitting fee for opportunity housing, or potential tax abatement program for opportunity housing, or
They don't let planning and zoning play in the tax department.
no, right, so I know that this is more like other outside of the planning and zoning.
Um, you know, you'd have to look at what the fee structure is. Currently, the fee structure, at least for planning and zoning and wetlands, is such that what it's trying to do is to not have the average taxpayer pay for the review that's necessary of applications that come in by experts, so that the commission has its own independent expert reviewing something. Because as I've explained to all the commissions, when there's only one expert, and if the commission goes against that expert and it goes to court, generally the courts are going to find that the expert rules.
Mhm.
And so that's why it's helpful for the land use boards to be able to hire their own independent expert, because then they get to pick which expert they want to listen to. And the courts generally don't want to overturn, as long as it was an expert that was in there. So the fee structure is scaled so that the applicant pays for that cost rather than the average taxpayer. Um, the building fee might be a different kettle of fish, because that's based on the cost of the project itself. Um, so that might be something, but there again, that fee structure is scheduled, well, actually, even the land use ones are all established by the Board of Selectmen through an ordinance.
Okay. And what about tax breaks? Has there ever been tax breaks before in housing
I
development?
am not, they don't let me pay in the tax thing. So you'd have to check with,
Tony?
most of the tax breaks come through the assessor's department, but I'm not sure how incentive things are done. You probably want to talk to town council on that.
Okay. Okay. Um, and I just want to circle back on the thought of working on trying to create more infrastructure in the town. is there any discussion you want to have on that, or is anybody interested in looking more into that in terms of, the idea is that if we were able to expand our public water, public sewer infrastructure, we're able to create more viable sites for opportunity housing. So, any thoughts?
Well, I have
I
thoughts.
thought that what Donovan was talking about was trying to come up with your list so you'd see where you, if you were going to consider that, where you might want it to go
Right.
based on the availability of parcels.
There's that. That's going to take a long time to implement, and it's going to depend upon um, more general support for changing things in town to accommodate more housing than I think we have on deck right now. I think we're going to have to do many months worth of work before we're ready to make a proposal like that. That would be my guess off the top of my head. It's the timing that would be not very encouraging.
Okay.
Low hanging fruit, I think we're looking for right now.
Right. I agree, Mary. I mean, I think we have a list of to-do items, right? Our to-do list. And I think that, as Mary indicated, it's going to take a lot of time to get all this done. So we should probably prioritize what we want to do first, second, and third, let's say, for example, and then just go down the line and do it that way. Because I think it's going to take a lot of time to get all of this information. I would anticipate that, with tax breaks and things of that nature, if we make that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, because as Chris said, TPZ has nothing to do with that. We'd probably want to know what other towns are doing, similar to ours in terms of incentives to build, and gather that information, for all these ideas, because they're all great ideas, right? So we probably want to know what our neighbors are all doing as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And maybe that's
I
where
was
the
just thinking it'd take a long time to build the infrastructure.
well, that
Maybe
too. Well, that too. That too.
yeah, well, I
But
mean, it's just
I'm really glad to have that in our back pocket because then we can say, well, X, Y, and Z. And if we wanted to do this and keep, it helps to keep the idea in people's minds and the idea that it wouldn't cost as much as they might think. It's helpful.
no, right, right. And perhaps what Donovan is suggesting, have it come more organically by identifying something that could happen if not for having some infrastructure, and maybe it could happen that way. So maybe that is a good tactic. Okay. Um,
Kathy, can I correct something that I said earlier because it's really going to bother me, and I want to make sure that the proper information is out there. So it'll be really quick, I promise. So I just wanted to tell everybody that regarding the purchase and sale of property for the town of Woodbridge, if this was something that, again, discussing the need for a special meeting versus referendum,
mhm.
I did indicate that it was the $50,000 or 0.15% of the total budget for that fiscal year. So whichever's greater. So
Oh,
that's a
whichever is greater.
determination, right? Whichever's greater. Um, so it indicates that or interest therein for a consideration in excess of the greater of 0.15% of the total budget for the fiscal year or $50,000.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and any leases, when I discussed leases, any leases that are in excess of 1 year,
Yeah, I
and
think
that would,
that's ridiculous.
right. So, I know. So that would trigger, the need for a special meeting. And of course, then you would have to look into the charter for the rules and regulations regarding special meetings, what quorum is. I believe quorum for special meetings is 100. And then, of course, by majority vote of Board of Selectmen, I believe that could be moved into referendum. But again, I will defer everyone to the appropriate information within the charter to answer those questions and defer to Jerry. But that's exactly what it indicates for sale of real property. which is town property. So those are that's the regulations for that. So it
Okay.
was bothering me that I didn't have that information before. So thank you for letting me fill you in on that. So, but that again would be all board of selectmen. That would be not that those are the individuals that would be you know, having the special meeting and making that determination. No commission or committee would do that. So that's it. Thank you. That's all I said.
Great, great. All right, thanks. That was these are strategies, right? I mean, I think we just gotta keep on moving the ball down the field. Um,
Mhm.
um I think well so the next item is adoption of meeting dates. Did you send out meeting dates, Chris?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, okay.
I thought I did.
Yep,
Um,
she did.
I don't know. Right?
I know I printed them because I
I
thought
got
we were
'em.
going to have an in-person meeting. So they're basically all the first Wednesday of the month, but there were two conflicts that I noted. One was in April where it would fall on April 5th, and that's the first day of Passover. And I assume that that probably should get moved.
Yeah.
And then in December next year, the meeting would again be on December 7th. And that's, I don't know why, and that's the first day of Hanukkah. And I wasn't sure if that's something that needs to get moved or not. But all the other ones had no conflicts as the first Wednesday of each month.
Do we have to like decide this tonight because
It has to be filed with the town clerk no later than January 31st,
okay,
2023.
Oh,
why don't we wait because I'd want to poll
I mean, you can also just say that you're going to do this based on a poll and everybody will get back to me so I can get this silly thing filed.
yeah, I'll send this out to everybody.
I thought I sent it, but maybe I didn't. There's been a lot going on here.
Yeah.
I got it.
You did?
I did
yeah.
get it. The list, yeah.
Okay. Well, then I did send it out.
And I can't ever find anything. So I mean, don't want to rub it in, Kathy, but I have
Yeah,
it.
so you,
Well, none of us can attend all the meetings all the time, every single one.
Right.
um
Today's the seventh, right?
what's that?
Today's the seventh. We're meeting on the seventh.
Yeah, so
Meeting
how
on the
does that fall
7th. Yeah.
from the summer
So
to
I don't know why I had the 7th on the sheet. Hang on a sec.
Now I can't find it. Now that I said I have it, I can't find it. Let me look for it. Oh, here it is.
Nope, it would be the 6th.
Oh,
Oh, okay. And that's the first day of Passover?
And let me check my handy dandy.
This is where I need.
So you, in that case, you would be fine because Hanukkah starts on the 7th.
Oh,
So we
okay.
don't have to worry about that one.
We're just gonna figure out April 5th.
You just have to, and I think Passover's, a fairly important date.
Right.
According to my
I can tell you that the first night of Passover, people will not be available.
Okay,
I'm certain of
so
that.
Passover goes from April 5th to April 13th. And
But only the first two nights are usually a problem.
Right, it's only the first 2 nights.
okay, because the 13th is beyond the second Wednesday. So if you wanted to defer to the second Wednesday, which would be the 12th, and then we'll just worry about where you're going to meet when we get there, because I think that might be a Board of Selectmen meeting night. I'm not sure.
Okay. The one we
We could
could
file it and we can make any changes, right, Chris? So if we have to change
If you make
anything.
changes, then it becomes a special meeting and you can't add
Oh,
anything
right, you're
to the
right.
agenda.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
the charm of a regular meeting is that you can add stuff.
But is there a conflict with you on the 12th?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't go to the selectmen's meeting. I'm just saying that I think the room might not be available upstairs if you were meeting in person.
Right. No, we could figure out a place.
We can figure that one out. I mean,
Yeah.
we could always do a WebEx meeting that night or something.
Okay.
So if you're happy with that, if you could take a vote, then I can get this done.
Do we have a quorum?
You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of you out of 8, right? Because we're only missing Dwight, Lou, and
Elaine.
Elaine. So you're good.
Okay. So all in favor?
I
Who moved?
Oh.
I move that we
Sorry.
alter the schedule for our meeting in April of 2023 from the 7th to the 12th. From the first
from the
Wednesday
5th
to the
That's
2nd.
okay. And who seconded that?
Donovan.
Hey, Donovan, thank you. Now you can vote.
All right. All in favor?
Yay, Ra. Thank you guys.
Sorry, Rhoda.
Listen, everybody.
All right. Well, the last item is other business. Is there anything people want to talk about? No, we're good.
So again, I guess ask real quick. So for the next meeting, our assignment for which is January, that's going to what our assignment then is going to be working out what recommendations we want to make regarding changing the zoning regs. Is that going to be our first item of business?
Yeah, I think we should be talking about, some potential zoning reg changes and I think we should also start thinking about like all the regulatory barriers that we could come up with and just have to kind of do a dual track on different departments we're going to have to talk to. But yeah, certainly that. Certainly we want to
Incentives in addition to regulation changes, right? Incentives.
and I'll
Uh,
send out some information because there's plenty of articles printed on breaking down regulatory barriers to affordable housing to get some ideas and maybe I could see if the partnership or maybe even SCROG has some information on what other towns are doing that help incentivize affordable housing, including different programming that could happen because we were talking about the that it costs money to create affordable housing and you can't just ask a developer, gee, can you make this affordable if it's not written, what hasn't been incorporated into the underwriting because you have to have, and that's why there's public subsidies for affordable housing because it's expensive to build and operate affordable housing. And then we probably want to talk about a little bit more. We'll have, who we're going to have at our power mapping meeting for January 17th. So we could talk more about that. So those are the potential agenda items. And if anybody else has any other agenda items that need to come on this, please feel free to email me and we'll get that on.
So
So,
just so I know, do you want this to be another WebEx meeting or do you want it in person?
I think we could do it in person. I think we were just doing this WebEx because of Ben being in Philadelphia. But I think generally we rather meet in person, right? I mean that's a good question. I think last time when I asked folks, people rather meet in person.
I think meeting in person is always better if there's not a reason not to.
Yeah, yeah.
And to add to complication, I'm actually in Wisconsin right now, but I'll tell you that story another time.
Well, that sounds fun. Um, okay, Ben. I don't know if you have any or Ben, if you have any closing words before we sign off.
I just appreciate your having me, and I'm happy to learn from you here, and look forward to learning more together. I think I'll put my email address in the chat and my phone number if anybody. Kathy's got it too. But if anybody wants to be in touch, has more questions, etc., low bar for communication. I really want to be there to assist however I can. So thank you so much.
Great, great. All right, guys. Well, have a good night, and we'll see you next year, right? For the most part.
Yep. So
Bye.
everybody have
Happy
a
holidays.
safe and healthy holiday season, and
Too.
same for the new year.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody. Bye.
Night.